Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show.
Hello,
Raw
everybody. Welcome to the Real Life
Life,
Health Show. I'm so
right
excited
to
about a
know.
return guest, and he has a new book out we're going to talk about. This is Dr. Frank Sabatino. Dr. Frank, thank you for coming back on the show.
Paul, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Last time we had you on, we were talking about your fasting retreats, and I'm a big advocate of fasting for so many reasons. It works great. But now you have a book for uh, everyone needs this book. I mean, in the world today, it seems that so many people are overweight. It's become normal. And your new book is called Weightless, Compassionate Weight Loss for Life.
Yeah, there it is, so people can see it. And you see that big heart-shaped veggies and fruits and all that, because the book is all about love and heart too, so people know that.
Yes, so you're helping people. Now, is this book for people that are a little overweight, people that are obese, or just for the average person?
This is for anyone who wants to promote health, but specifically people that have been in that dance of either having a difficult time losing weight or have lost some and had a difficult time keeping it off. This is really a manual of hope, Paul, for people that have been on that roller coaster, and you know that that can be a devastating roller coaster for people with weight.
Sure. Tell us about your own personal journey. Before you got into health growing up, did you struggle with weight loss?
Yeah, I had some weight issues as a child. I had bigger issues with my bowel. I had kind of like a colitis as a child. And, growing up in New York City, I grew up in the Bronx in New York City. And, back in the 50s and early 60s when I grew up, my parents, they found, New York had some of the best specialists in the world, but it was so intriguing that even like today, it's hard to believe that so many doctors and especially people that focus on the bowel, like gastroenterologists, don't have any idea that nutrition and food has anything related to bowel function. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so I grew up eating a lot of meat, dairy. It was an Italian household, all of that. And I had a lot of bowel issues that by the time I got into my teenage years and I met somebody that turned me on to this lifestyle, when I started doing the plant exclusive stuff with a lot of fresh, raw fruits, vegetables, and so on, all of those bowel issues became a thing of the past. And I went through, 15, 20 years of medical mismanagement to find this guy that was like an insurance salesman who happened to be the father of a schoolmate of mine who had collected a library of all of the original hygienic pioneers, Dr. Shelton, all of these people that were doing, a lot of natural work with plant food. That when I started doing that, it was all gone. All these problems were gone. So I found it shocking that after 20 years of medical mismanagement, it took an insurance salesman from the Bronx to fix my colitis or to help me fix my colitis. So anyway, yeah, so my early journey started with that, and it really got into where I started learning about fasting. I even fasted a few times in my later teenage years and early 20s. And then I met a lot of the doctors that were running fasting institutions and all of that professionally over the next 20 years or so. And my life took that course where I started to incorporate that into my own practice.
Yeah. Did you know Dr. William Esser, who ran a fasting retreat? It was like literally walking distance from my house.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Bill was a good friend, and of course, his grandson, Dr. Stefan Esser, is a major orthopedist and a hygienic doctor that is in the Jacksonville area. But Bill had the, and you'll appreciate this, he had the best mango trees on the East Coast. I
He
don't know if you
had.
knew that. I don't
Yeah.
know if you knew that. He had those, they were
Yeah.
like 50-year-old, etched, incredible mango producing trees in Lake Worth.
I was just thinking the other day, I mean, I don't see a better way of living than principles of the natural hygiene way. And I was just telling my wife, I saw Dr. Esser, when he was like 90 or 91 years old, going to the post office right near my house because he lived near me. And then I saw him the same day at a health food store. And the guy had the program down. I interviewed him for my old book and everything else. I mean, I take it there's so many other things that affect our health. But when you have such a great diet, I mean, 91 is excellent. I think he lived to 91, which is excellent in today's world. But still, I mean, what happens that, like the average person of old age lives And he was playing tennis to the day he died, so that's great.
Well,
But
that's the key, Paul. And it's not so much the number of years, it's, the quality that you're living those years. So when you see these guys like him and, the Fred Bichis and these guys in their 90s that are still very productive, it goes to show that you don't have to go down this degenerative path and end your life in horror and pain, on a respirator and this and that. These guys go out like you're blowing out a candle. That's the way we're supposed to pass.
sure, sure.
And for so many of us, it's just so much abject horror and pain and discomfort and disfigurement. And that's what it's really about. How do we get the most out of those years? How do we get the quality out of those moments that we live? And this is important.
Well, I'm going to tell you two things about this book. First of all, what I notice is those old people that are not eating healthy, as they get older, they put on weight. But what I noticed from Dr. Bishie, Dr. Esser, and other people that are doing the diet right, as they get older, they seem to like lose weight, like in a healthy way. They're not putting on weight. They either maintain their weight or are losing weight. And according to your book, this weight gain leads to all these major issues.
Well, it's funny, and this is really, it's not funny, it's ironically funny, but right now, 40% of the entire globe is overweight. And in the next 10 years, that's going to be 50% of the entire population of the earth. And the interesting thing is, you've got this dieting industry, which is somewhere in the range of a 70 plus billion-dollar industry with a 95% failure rate. So it preys on the hopelessness of people with this issue when, in fact, as you made the point, it's an incredibly hopeful situation. But you've got to adopt the low calorie dense plant foods. You've got to address a lifestyle that involves moving more, sleeping better, getting more psychological poise and emotional balance, and spiritual connection with nature and the world. I mean, these things are all part of the original hygienic model, and they are truly the principles of living. And if you embrace them, the quality of life and performance of life is much better.
Is there any way possible somebody could be a healthy overweight, or are those two oxymorons, those two words?
No, it's an oxymoron, because we know that as weight and body fat go up, that becomes the leading risk factor for the most major forms of death and disability in our culture, including heart disease, including stroke, diabetes, etc. So those particular health problems all are connected to having excess weight and body fat. And so it's a real issue. And really this book, the reason why, what makes this book unique, not only does it provide the full constellation of factors that will assure healthy weight and body fat, but it does it by dispelling the lie that to achieve healthy weight and your goal of healthy weight, you've got to kill animals, eat animals, and feed all of these industries of destruction with high protein, high fat diets, etc. So the program is not only about creating those basic conditions focused on plant food that help you assure healthy weight, but it's also by understanding the consequences of those choices, so that while you're improving health, while you're losing weight, you're promoting the health and life and rights of all animals and the protection of the planet itself. No one has ever done that in a kind of a weight loss book, which is why I wanted to do it, because I got frustrated with people constantly selling this idea that for you to be thin and lean and healthy, you've got to destroy animals and the planet on which we live. It's absolute nonsense, and it's contradictory to all healthy principles.
Well, you mentioned body fat. And so when I get in my life insurance test, they come to my house, they measure how much do you weigh? Now, you can be heavy, but my muscle weighs more than fat. So if I go to the gym, I could put, let's say, 10 pounds on. Am I considered overweight if I have a low body fat, but I have a high weight? Like, what's the correlation there?
Well, muscle doesn't weigh more than body fat. A pound of muscle is the same as a pound of fat. They're a pound. What happens with muscle is it takes up less space. It's more dense. So you could be heavier and look significantly leaner and thinner on the planet. So here's the problem. For the longest time, people focused only on scale weight. And the mistake of that is we now know that it's not the numbers on the scale that are most important. What's most important is what percentage of that weight is actually body fat. Why? Because fat cells release a series of chemicals and hormones that program absolute inflammation and disease. So you can have a phenomenon now, and I write about it in the book. It was actually discovered in Finland, called low body weight obesity, meaning that you can have low weight but higher levels of body fat, and it's actually a very unhealthy circumstance. So the combination of weight, numbers on the scale, and actual body fat are really the two things that have to be looked at together.
One of the things when I do a consultation with people is I ask them, more important than anything is what's their waist size. So if somebody has a high body fat, does that automatically mean their waist size is bigger than it should be, or not necessarily?
Yeah, usually that will be the case, though we do see these people with low body weight obesity. But as a rule, most people that put on weight put on that, that belly fat too. So you'll see their waist size typically will go up. But your point is well made. The waist to hip ratio and body fat are two other pieces of how we look at, if someone is really dangerously over fat.
How does the average person check their body fat, not just their weight? Because you could have a scale in your house, but how do you check your body fat?
Well, there are ways that people will do it. They have impedance measurements, little machines that can do it. The most accurate is dunking somebody in a water tank. And usually they do these skin calipers where they grab pieces of skin, but there's such a high error rate in that. My personal feeling is I think you can get a handle on looking at your body mass, just looking at your shape as things are changing and as weight is going up or coming down. And it's not hard to see what's jiggling and what's not as you gain weight. So without getting too crazy, you can get a kind of a handle that way. But there are ways to measure body fat. What I find though is that by doing what we're talking about, especially eating low calorie dense vegetables and fruits, you're going to see weight loss and you're going to see the whole shape of your body change with body fat. So I don't think you need to get lost in the measurements. You just need to embrace the eating and living plan that we're talking about.
Sure. And when we talk about putting on this weight, is it a calorie thing? Because not all calories are the same. Or is it a fat thing? Because not all fat is the same. Or is it all the same?
No, it's not only just calories in and calories out, but calories do accrue. So for example, if you're eating plant food, starches provide 4 calories per gram. Protein provides 4 calories per gram, but fat provides 9 calories per gram. So as you're highly increasing those oils and fats in the diet, especially from processed foods, you can see how the calorie density is really going up. But the way we use those calories metabolically is also affected by other lifestyle choices like exercise, like sleep. For example, sleep deficiency is one of the biggest ways to increase belly fat. And so that fat compartment is the most risky of all, which is what you're measuring by looking at the waist, as you mentioned. So the bottom line is people sometimes don't realize that sleep deficiency is a primary factor of weight gain, which is why I have a whole chapter on sleep and how to improve it. Physical activity improves the efficiency of how the body uses calories. So, all of those pieces become critical. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie, but the way you're accruing them, the way you're handling them, the way you're holding on or using them, all are affected by lifestyle factors.
Okay. So, and in terms of what we eat, are there healthy fats, or are they all fats are not healthy?
No. There are incredibly healthy fats. In fact, I make the point, fat is one of the essential macronutrients of the diet. We need a certain amount of fat and oil. The mistake that people make is that they're getting it in bottled oil form. I never, under any circumstances, recommend bottled oils. I recommend oil only in the food in which it's contained. If you took a piece of romaine lettuce and just did this with your fingers, you'd see all oil on your fingertips. Romaine lettuce alone has about 5 to 7% body fat content. We only need about 15% fat in the entire diet. So we're looking at getting oils and fats in the food. So for example, nuts, seeds, plants, greens, those kinds of avocado, those are going to provide the fat we need. There's no animal in nature that isolates the pure fat from their food chain, puts it in big bottles of liquid fat we call oil, and then douse it on everything. It's been absurd. And then think about all the oils that are added to processed foods to make them more palatable. So we're getting this inundation of high fat and oil calories. And, and I make the point, one of the big mistakes that vegans and raw food people were making for many years was eating so much coconut oil. And it's a huge mistake because coconut oil is more saturated than lard, than animal fat. So I tell people, you got to be sensitive to the fact that we want oil only in whole foods, not in bottled oils.
Do you think a raw foodist can overdo coconuts?
Yes, absolutely. And it can get very saturated. In fact, I've had people with raw food and doing a lot of coconut oil.
No, not coconut oil, but coconuts, like straight up coconut.
You know what happens with the nuts? Because they're so high in fiber and meat, they kind of build in a stop point. That's the beautiful thing about plants. They're so high in fiber and water that when you're eating them, you get a filling up effect. So you tend not to overeat as much, especially if you're eating more slowly and mindfully. So you can use coconut. I just don't want any fractured coconut oils or coconut sugars or coconut products in that regard.
Okay, so now what about the omega-3 and the omega-6 and the balance? They say it's hard to find a healthy omega balance when you're eating only vegan products. And
that's actually not true, actually. And I'm going to debunk that because I have a whole section of that in my book. The truth of the matter is, when you look at fatty acids, we know that there are two families of essential fatty acids, meaning we can't make these. They've got to come in. And you got the omega-6, which is made from linoleic acid, and you got the omega-3 from alpha-linolenic acid. Well, those two families provide the brake and pedal for the immune system, the inflammatory response. So if you exaggerate the omega-6 family, you get increased inflammation. If you don't get enough of the omega-3, you get increased inflammation. So by bringing up the omega-3 side, which is usually things that include greens, walnuts, seeds like chia and hemp and flax and all of that, that will ratchet down inflammation. The problem is, when you look at our culture, people are getting 50 to 60% of their diet from junk food, which is concentrated in fragmented oils of the omega-6 family, safflower, corn, all of that, which dramatically increases inflammation. And they're eating animal bodies that are loaded with arachidonic acid. 80% of the protein for most Americans comes from animal products. So the oils in meat, dairy are high in arachidonic acid, which drives the inflammatory pathway. On the plant side, alpha-linolenic acid, which is found in walnuts and seeds and so on, is in a pathway that then produces things like EPA, DHA, and so on. One of the arguments has always been that because the body seems to convert a small amount of ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, only like 0.5 to 1% in the blood to DHA, the feeling is all vegans are going to be DHA deficient. So that led people to prescribe fish oils and then oils from algae and so on. We're finding out now that the body actually converts a lot more of that ALA to the necessary DHA, but in the liver and fat cells of the body. So although you're getting a little smaller amounts in the blood, there's a lot being produced in these backup tissues that then can be released to the brain. So we know that DHA in that pathway is required for brain health. So it's involved in mood, it's involved in Alzheimer's, heart disease, and so on. But apparently we're making more than enough as a vegan in liver and fat cells, and we don't need to worry about it. And when you load the body up with DHA as a supplement, either from algae or from animals, you're winding up blocking that pathway because you stop the body from producing its own. So you always want precursors like ALA, STA, stearidonic acid, and EPA, those kinds of things. And they're coming in quite adequately when you're getting a variety of plant foods. But you do have to add the seeds, or you would have to take a plant supplement that provides the precursors. I never recommend taking DHA as a final product in algae or fish oil. It only causes changes in cardiac function. It raises LDL levels. It can create fibrillation in the heart. We want to get the whole food sources, and the body will be able to convert plenty of that in liver and fat cells, making it available for the brain when we need it.
If somebody took a test, do you believe the tests are accurate?
No, they're not. Because what
Okay.
happens with the test, the only test that's really done is this omega index test, which maybe you've seen, where they finger prick the finger, you get a blood sample, then they look at the membrane of the red blood cell, and they calculate the amount of EPA and DHA, which are the essential omega-3 fatty acids, compared to all the fatty acids in the membrane. The problem with the test is that it's only measuring conversion in the blood. It's not looking at the storage forms in liver and fat. And that's been a problem. And unfortunately, that's been a problem that has not been rectified enough, even by many of the plant physicians who are still recommending loading the system up with DHA. The plant sources like walnuts, seeds, should be a mainstay of the diet. They should be part of the diet regularly, lots of greens, things of that nature. If you're going to take a supplement, you would want to take a precursor-like supplement. And probably the best one, and I have no residuals and I have no affiliation with this, but Jeff Palmer sells one made from ahi flower, which is a plant, a seed that's grown from a flower in England. And his ahi flower supplement is probably the best precursor omega-3 supplement that exists, because it's high in ALA and it's high in stearidonic acid. And he's at cleanmachineonline.org. And I have no affiliation with him, but his product is probably the best researched and the best precursor omega-3 supplement that's out there.
So if the test doesn't work, how does somebody know if they need this supplement?
Well, the bottom line here is this. You have these ways of, there are blood tests that will look at the amount of these omegas in your blood, which you could do. The best way is to really take a good look at the overall eating plan. So if I'm counseling with someone, I do a very in-depth journal of what they've been eating. Most of the time when I counsel someone, I want to see a complete diary of about a week of their entire eating plan. And I mean everything they put into their mouth. And just by looking at that, you can gauge whether they're really getting adequate amounts of that. And then we can address it with either plant sources or a supplement if necessary.
I've interviewed several long-term raw foodists, and several of them have had high LDL when they got tested. I don't know what their body fat was, but if they're not eating any animal fat, and they're not,
the biggest leading cause of LDL being elevated like that would be coconut and coconut oil. And then also the fact that they may be taking algae forms of DHA. Sometimes the vegans are supplementing with the seaweed form of DHA, and it will raise LDL levels also. Now, also understand that cholesterol is somewhat genetically determined too. So regardless of how you're eating, some people as vegans may actually be creating higher LDL levels just because it's genetically programmed to do that. So there can be several different factors involved in that.
Okay. In your book, when you talk about eating, not everyone knows the terms of natural hygiene or even what a raw vegan is, but you keep it simple and you say, avoid these three things and you're going to be on the right track. Salt, oil, and sugar.
Right.
So
we it's an SOS-free approach, and you and I have talked about this before in a previous show. And again, look, for people going vegan or plant exclusive, and I also use the phrase plant exclusive. I don't like the phrase plant-based, because plant-based still implies you could have a lot of plants, but you may be eating other things. So I'm not keen on that whole thing. So I kind of narrow it down to vegan, whole plant exclusive, SOS free. And that to me kind of clears up any confusion. So the bottom line is yes, and that's setting the bar pretty high, because for some people getting rid of salt completely, or some people getting rid of oil completely is a step. They're in a transition, and that's fine. just we're moving toward that as best as you can.
Sure. I think this is so important. What I have found is I wrote a book called The Daylight Diet. No matter what you're eating, no matter how healthy you're eating, it doesn't digest the same if you're eating it late at night or right before going to sleep as eating earlier in the day. Do you agree? And do you talk about this in your book at all?
I do talk about the rhythm of and pattern of eating related to the circadian rhythm of the body for sure. And I agree that there should be probably close to about a 3 hour period between the time you ate your last food and when you go to bed. And I think if you can keep that model about 2.5 to 3 hours, you're going to find that you'll sleep better. You'll find that you'll wake up more energetic. And if you're someone who gets up in the morning with pain or discomfort, you'll find that that will be a lot less. That's one of the reasons why I do like the idea of intermittent fasting a little bit, even though it's not a real fast. It gets people kind of tapped into the light dark cycle a little better. You're typically not eating. If you think about it, nighttime is not a time for eating. It's a time for winding down and preparing for sleep. But for so many of us, we eat the largest meal of the day late at night, and that can be a bit of a problem. We're better off eating more food earlier in the day, closer to midday, rather than closer to later times in the evening. So I think you're right on by talking about that.
And that's interesting because I've seen some people do something that's kind of orthodox in the way we eat. And, I've always learned, the fruits are very cleansing. You could eat, most people eat fruits in the morning. They eat their heavy meal in the day, or most people save their heavy meal for the end of the day. But as a raw vegan, I got in the pattern of eating, fruits throughout the day, and maybe for the later afternoon meal or the last meal of the day is the big salad. That's what most raw food and vegetarians do. But I've seen some people do it opposite. They eat their big salad as the first meal and then they finish it off with fruits. Uh, have you heard that, or did you see any?
I've seen people do both of those things. I think the more we can have a less caloric intake at night, I do believe it's a better circumstance, because if you look at the typical circadian rhythm of the body, nighttime is a time for winding down, actually, and daylight hours are winding up, and you can make the case that the digestive fires of the body are burning more vigorously earlier in the day, more midday, mid-afternoon, rather than late at night on a rhythm. Now, we can change that rhythm. We force the body to do a lot of things, but I still believe that, as you mentioned, eating less at night, late at night. But if you're having a big salad and you're eating somewhere between, let's say, 5 and 7 at night, and you're going to bed at 10, that's still a 3-hour break. And you're not going to eat again probably till next morning, 8 or 9. So that's still about a 14-hour period between when you ate and when you'll eat again. I think that's all fine. I don't see any problem with that.
Sure. Now, on this diet you're recommending, or just let's say a raw food diet or a vegetarian diet, is it possible or common to overeat?
No, it's not, because it's almost impossible to overeat. Here's the reason why. When you look at the calorie density, meaning the calories that these foods provide, all fruits and vegetables are somewhere in the range of about between 65 and a couple of hundred calories a pound. When you get into cooked starches, that goes up a little higher, between 300 and 700, things like beans and potatoes and pastas and things of that nature. So what happens is these foods are so low in calorie density, but they're so extremely high in fiber and water that they create such a filling up effect that it's almost difficult to overeat, because by the time you fill up that stomach and that intestine, you're still only several hundred calories. So it's very difficult to really overeat. But if you look at things like, dairy products, fish products, and so on, now you're getting closer to about 2,000 calories a pound, and they don't have any fiber. So you're not getting that feedback that helps you stop. And now you're just building in and overeating on more dense calories. So it's very difficult to really truly overeat. And that's why I tell people this program is not about eating less, it's about eating well. And you can eat huge volumes of food because the calorie density is so low.
It's interesting because I've transferred over the years to getting used to what I'm eating. But when you first start out, I mean, somebody can get full on a hamburger, but if they're just eating bananas, two bananas aren't going to cut it. They got to keep eating many and many.
Yeah,
So
that's also, as you know, that's also a kind of a bias to how we've been eating. So you get used to eating processed foods a certain way. But look, the people eating a hamburger don't get full on a hamburger. You know, they got the 48-ounce soda, they got the French fries that are bigger than them, they got the hamburger. You know, so they're overeating on all of those foods. The truth of the matter is, if you really ate slowly and you ate a big salad that had all the fixings in it, all these incredible veggies and all that, you would stop long before you would overeat because it's so filling. It's a filling up effect.
now I see some raw foodists and vegetarians out there eating, they promoting like 30 bananas a day and stuff like this. And if they're exercising and running and jogging and running marathons, I get it. But for the average desk worker eating 30 bananas a day, do you think that's a little too much?
Again, it's going to be a question as to what the needs are of that person. If they're eating slowly and mindfully, and they're eating these foods, to me, it might be a little bit excessive, but if it's working, then it works. That's why I like having greens. That's why I recommend a little bit of cooked starch in the diet. You'll notice in my book, I have sweet potato, things of this nature, because it kind of diversifies the diet a little bit and, you know, moves away from having to eat 50 bananas in a day. You know what I'm saying? But again, if that's the way you're eating and it's working and all the other parameters of life and health are good, I'm not going to get in the way of that. But I would recommend eating very slowly, letting the body really, you know, digest that food and work with that food. Too many of us are eating on the run and we're just shoveling food into the body, and we wind up overeating before the brain can even register that we've begun to eat.
That's an extremely important point, and you've mentioned it several times, and I know you talk about it in the book about eating slowly, chewing your food properly, thinking about what you're eating, and just, not just being distracted when you eat. It's like you've mentioned it several times. It's all over your book, and I think this is, in agreement with you, one of the major reasons why people are overweight and never satisfied from their food because they're not focusing on the food. They're completely
Well,
distracted.
think about it. For most people, eating is something they're going to do quickly between point A and point B that they have to do. It's almost like, I'm not going to even pay it. When in fact, it's a primary act of informing and nurturing the body. So you want to take those moments where you become really connected to what you're eating. And even if you're doing exercises where you can even envision how that thing was grown and the energy that went into that and the sun and the water and the life and the man plant or the men and women planting, all of those behaviors really bring us into a better present time connection with eating. And you tend to overeat less when you do that too, instead of just becoming mindless. So much of our behavior is mindless activity.
Absolutely. I look at cats, stray cats, when they're eating on a regular basis, they eat slow and they take their time. But if you give a hungry cat some food, I mean, they're eating that thing so fast and just
Right.
it's crazy. And the
Yeah,
people are kind of like the same way.
they're afraid someone's going to take it from them. That's why.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
most people act that way. They act like it's the
yeah.
last meal if they don't, or they're eating at breakfast and they're so concerned about what they're going to eat for lunch, which is even worse. Think about that. So they're constantly, all day, they're just programming in a way as if they're not going to get enough food in the day. And it's kind of a funny thing, but it's a behavior we need to shift for sure.
I believe the best wrapper around the food is the skin around a fruit or vegetable.
I
Uh,
agree.
the more we get into bag, box containers, or cans, the more we get into that's been processed, and that's a problem.
You pick up one of your beautiful mangoes. What's the ingredients? Mangoes. You know what I mean? That's it. It's mangoes.
Exactly, exactly. So you've mentioned if it's working for you, it's okay. You mentioned. So how does somebody know? Do they test their blood? Do they monitor their weight? How does somebody
Well,
know if it's working for
yeah,
them?
you're monitoring, you're looking at your weight, you're looking at your body, you're experiencing your energy, you're seeing how you wake up in the morning, you're seeing how you sleep at night, you're seeing how you deal with the stress of your life, how you're responding emotionally. I mean, when you take a good inventory of yourself moving and living in the world, it's a lot of information you get. In fact, well, if I'm counseling people, that's where I get my information. I'm asking all those questions about you. And by you giving me that information, you're giving me so much insight as to maybe the best way to help you. The truth is, we could all do that with ourselves. When you get up in the morning, are you getting out of bed with energy? If you're not, something's not right. Or are you able to have nice free flowing bowel function? If you're constipated and you don't, there's something wrong. Is your energy waning through the day? Can you make it from breakfast to lunch without having to, lay down? I mean, there's a lot of ways to look and see how things are working. Yeah, on a more sophisticated level, you can do a physical exam, you can go do a blood test, whatever. If you've got some pain that's been relentless, you may want to pursue that with a practitioner. But the truth is, we can get so much information about what's going on in our own lives just by paying attention to our lives. It's the same issue. Most of us are mindless in how we do everything. And so this is where you can, garner a little insight about yourself.
Sure. One of the things you bring out in your book, it says to build and nurture compassion, love, and self-esteem for sustainable long-term success. So it's not just about diet, it's, and about what we're eating, but, like, do you think,
You're a very spiritual person. And so I'm going to present this in a different way, because the book is a lot about spirituality, but in this regard. To me, there's a difference between spirituality and religiosity. It's not about religion in this sense. You can make a case that a spiritual awareness is that when you act, you have an awareness of how it is affecting other people and the environment and the world around you. You have a sense that what you're doing is not isolated to just you. It's involved in the connection of you to everything else. One of the beautiful things about this is that when you're eating in this plant exclusive manner, you come to understand quickly that the consequences of your choice is not limited by the boundary of your own kitchen. It's affecting industries and people and animals and the environment around you. And when you start understanding that connection, you as a conscious being start to take more steps to make choices that have a more positive effect on all those things around you. To me, that's an evolution of a spiritual consciousness. It's this idea that, yeah, I'm going to take more responsibility for the consequences of how I'm choosing. When I put an animal body on my plate, or I take a piece of cheese or drink a glass of milk, I'm so feeding industries of violence and destruction that are not only harming the animals involved, they're harming the environment, and as a result, harming all other people in the process. We, in a way, should not have the right to really do that. We need to have a consciousness that says, yes, compassion and empathy and love and forgiveness and gratitude, these are the highest levels of human behavior. And in true spiritual traditions, that's what you're fostering. You're urging people to engage and embrace those higher levels of human behavior and emotion. Well, the beautiful part of this way of living and eating is that it does that with every meal. It does that with every food choice. It does that with every bit of our behavior. And I find that when you do that, you start becoming compassionate and loving on all levels. Your relationships are better. You're handling and dealing with people more effectively and more kindly. You're looking and understanding that animals have rights, and on this planet, the environment itself requires our support and our input. So all of those things to me are part of this dance. And if you're going to make choices about weight loss or health, they should be incorporating all of those considerations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how do some people consume animals, eat that junk food, and avoid being overweight? Is it massive exercise? Is it luck?
Well,
How do some people manage to escape that? The few people that do.
Because there are genetic factors for how we handle calories and certain things. But the truth is, in my experience, while they may not be showing necessarily abnormal weight issues in the moment, they're still planting the seeds for abnormal health outcome. And you'll find these people, they're thin, now all of a sudden their cholesterol is through the roof, or they've got some issues with sugar levels going up. So it may not directly manifest right away in the changes in the body that you can visibly see, but there's a lot of stuff going on underneath that are manifesting. And the truth is, yes, some people have genetic makeups that allow them to tolerate certain abuses more than others. Doesn't mean they're not abuses, though. You
Sure.
understand what I'm saying? So
Sure.
still abusive. You may not be manifesting it to the same extent as someone else, but there is still abusive behavior.
Sure. I didn't think about it when I was growing up, but when I used to go to a baseball game like Old Timers Day, I didn't really think about it. But now when I go and see old baseball players and basketball players that I grew up watching who were fit then, now they're like all overweight, and it's like
Yeah.
it's when they stop playing the sport and stop being as active, I guess the true colors come out, huh?
Well, with athletes, it's an interesting thing because I've counseled and worked with a lot of athletic people. When you're at a real high level athletes like you're talking about, these are like the elite athletic performers. When they're doing their sport, it's not about, historically in the past, it wasn't about health. It was just about performance. So they did whatever they felt they needed to perform at the highest level. So they could be injecting this or using that and blah, blah, blah. So now it's more common now that the more modern day athlete is looking more at nutrition, is looking at ways to change the game in more healthy behavior. But those older guys, that's why when they were like in their 50s, they were like men and women in their 80s. Their bodies had aged so dramatically by just beating it up with performance, not being concerned really with the health aspect. So the general person like you and me, we're not worried about performing at an elite athletic level. We're much more concerned about how do we foster healthy outcome day to day and give ourselves the greatest chance for longevity. These athletes don't think in those terms, especially those older ones. So by the time they were 40s, 50s, and 60s, they look like old people. They look like really aged people.
Absolutely. Well, your book, your information, I mean, your fasting retreat, your information, we discussed in our last video. I'm going to put a link to the last video down. Everybody needs to see that. But hold up your book again. This book is now available. You can get it. I'm going to put a link
Both in
below.
paperback and now in digital form
Now in
too,
digital form as well.
on
Yeah.
Amazon.com. And I urge people, once you get it, do me a favor. If you enjoyed it, if it had a positive impact, put a nice positive review on Amazon, because those reviews go a long way for helping people want to tap into these books. So please do me that favor. Anybody that has a mind to do that, please do that.
And we all know somebody who's obese or overweight, and this would be a
Absolutely.
great gift for those people. Uh, and also for yourself to apply these principles. I definitely see it as just a blessing to so many people.
There's so much overwhelmingly general good health information too in this book that is part of the weight loss story, but it also applies to people not necessarily with that weight issue, but it is definitely for people that have been struggling with this problem, that have had difficulty taking weight off, and have maybe had difficulty keeping it off. But like I said, it is a manual of hope. It is a hopeful process, because too many people that have this problem feel hopeless. And too many of the fad diets and drug approaches are preying on that hopelessness, and it's only hurting people. And I dispel all of that in this book. I talk about the drug approaches. I talk about the fad animal-based diets. It's all in there. So take advantage of it.
Are there any recipes in the book?
Yes, there's a whole section on recipes. There's a whole book, a section on meal planning. There's an entire chapter on eating out in the real world. So there's a lot of strategies in the book.
And do you give information also about here's a daily diet? Do you give examples of what it should look like?
I'm sorry, which I missed the
A
first
daily
one.
diet. Do you give like
Yeah, I go through 7, 14, and 21 to 30-day programs to jumpstart everything too. And some of them include periods of fasting and detoxification, which you don't necessarily have to do, but I lay it out because they can be good helps in a jumpstart to the process. But I do lay out some meal planning. But again, I don't like to do a lot of laying out of meals, because I want people to be a little bit more free form and just understanding that this program is about eating a diversity of plants, fruits, and vegetables. And that's what we want to do, get you into that mentality of, I'm going to give you some recipes and ideas, but understand that you've got so much flexibility and it's so much fun to create this in your own life.
All right. A couple more questions. So you mentioned fad diets. To lose weight, a lot of people now are doing this carnivore diet and they are losing weight. So what's your opinion about? We know it's not, you and I know it's not overall health. but it's
Well,
giving people immediate results.
the biggest thing to realize is that we're not carnivores, Paul. The idea that you're going to go into a diet that's not suited for who we are physiologically. We are herbivore, frugivorous animals. That's what all the primates are in nature. And the truth of the matter is, when you look at the impact that those kind of diets have, when you're dealing with a physiology where we don't have the digestive tract length, the size of the liver, the teeth, you're creating so many other potential problems across time. But when you first adopt that, if you're coming from eating a lot of refined food, there's no question you're getting into a higher protein thing. It's going to have a dehydration effect. You're going to lose plenty of water, which is part of weight loss. The problem is over time, it programs increases in uric acid, urea, higher cholesterol levels, all kinds of issues like that over time. So this is very problematic. We need to embrace who we are. If you think you're a carnivore, you're going to show me that by jumping on the back of a running zebra and ripping out a piece of its rump with your front teeth. That's not who we are. We're designed to pick a mango from a tree and eat it the way it is because we don't worry about steaming, sauteing, or cooking the mango. The truth of the matter is we need to get in line with who we are physiologically. And the truth of the matter is, this is one of the things I'm battling. This idea that you've got to eat and kill animals to lose weight is such an archaic biological lie, and it's going to hurt people across time. And unfortunately, that's coming for people that are feeling hopeless. That's why I wrote the book. Get involved with the plant approach that I'm recommending. Look at the other factors because it's not just food alone. And understand that in no way, shape, or form are you a carnivore, nor should you be eating that way. It's reprehensible. It's devastating across time. And it's also damaging everything around us, including the environment and other animals. There is no reason on this earth to do that.
Okay, I agree. Many people today eat with their eyes. They have a false sense of what they call hunger. It's not true hunger. Most people haven't felt true hunger. Do you think it's best for people to have set meal times, or do you think it's better to just eat whenever they think they're hungry?
Many times, because we're recommending this little bit of intermittent fasting, I just want those calories taken within a certain window of time. I find that once you start getting into the kind of foods that I'm recommending, you're going to be so satiated at that meal that there's usually long hours between when you eat again. If you're eating very small amounts and you're just not eating enough bulky stuff, chances are you'll be more hungry more frequently. So, I do want you to go to some degree with hunger, but your point is well made. Most people don't even know what that really truly is. So start eating a wider range of these high fiber plant foods because they're going to give you a filling up effect, and then see where that takes you. And then if you need a little piece of fruit or something in between, you could have that, and you'll start revamping how you take those foods in. And it'll start ending a lot of the problem that people have is just pure food addiction, Paul. They've been eating foods that the industries have so loaded with salt, oil, and sugar for so long that it's created a problem with taste sensitivity, and it's fed a certain kind of addiction in the brain to these foods.
Yes. Now, is there a balance between fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, or do you just say just get these good healthy calories
I
in
just
your body?
want to know that people are getting a nice, decent amount of good fresh fruit each day, a big salad each day, maybe some steamed greens, a variety of deep greens each day, and then some cooked starch if that's what they want to balance things with, like a sweet potato, some rice and beans or whatever. But I want to make sure they're getting a certain amount of good organic fresh fruit. A lot of times, as you made the point, it seems that that's easier for people to do probably earlier in the day. They tend to gravitate toward fruit a little bit earlier. In Florida, we have such a warm, hot climate that I find that I work out in the morning first, and my first meal naturally is just fresh fruit because it's so hydrating, and I love it that way. But you can have these foods throughout the day however you want. Some people start with a salad first in their day and do some fruit later. I just want to make sure you're getting a diversity of these plants. The key word is diversity. We're finding that diversity improves the microbiome, that population of organisms in our body and in our gut. It helps the body generally to have a diversity of these high fiber plant foods.
Do you talk about food combining at all in the book, or is
I
that not?
don't. To me, it's not as important. I
Okay.
just think that we want to simplify our diets. You don't need to put as many items maybe at one meal. But the bottom line is the old laws about food combining don't really hold up nearly as well. And I find sometimes when I get deeply into food combining, it turns people off from eating the diversity of things I really want them to eat. So I rather they chewed everything thoroughly, ate slowly. If you do have some major digestive issues, then I might get into a little bit of food combining a little bit more vigorously. But as a rule, I tend to just kind of get people to eat a diversity of these plants.
Okay, one of the common weight loss trends amongst vegans and raw foodists today on YouTube is going on something they call a juice feasting or a smoothie fast or something, where they'll just do blended food for 30 days, fruits and vegetables for 30 days, or juicing for 30 days to try to lose weight. Have you heard about this, and what's your opinion about things like
Yeah,
this?
these things have been kicking around for a long time. In fact, when people come to my retreats, sometimes they'll opt for 5 days to just do green juices for a detoxification program. The key to understand, though, is that the food that we're recommending has fiber. One of the biggest deficiencies of the American and the human diet is fiber, not protein. And so the bottom line is by getting a diversity of plants, it's important. If you do juices only, you're taking away the fiber component of that food. You are concentrating nutrients, so there's a nutrient density, but there's a fiber shortage. So my advice would be any of those kinds of kind of more extreme approaches, I would do them for a short period of time and always come back to the idea that we want to eat whole foods. Even smoothies are valuable because they do have fiber content too. But unless you've got some major digestive difficulties with teeth or chewing or your gut, I don't think we need to be blending salads and smoothieing long term. I think short term, those can have value 3, 4 days if you wanted, 4 or 5 days if you wanted to do like a little detox program. But I think generally speaking, we want to come back to eating food in its whole food form.
Great. This is one of the last and most important questions. One of the most popular diseases out there today is type 2 diabetes, which I believe is 100% diet related. Maybe you feel it's genetic or not, I don't know. But when somebody is given a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, one of the things that doctors might say is stay away from the fruit or stay away from sugar. Uh, what would you say to somebody? Because I know when
Well,
you talk about
here's,
they can overcome
here's
type 2 diabetes by eating your diet. So what would you
First,
say?
first of all, type 2 diabetes is probably one of the most reversible health problems that exists, and it's reversible with lifestyle change. But here's the problem that typically comes up with type 2 diabetes. As you made the point, type 2 diabetes by definition is high blood sugar. So the idea is if you're eating foods that contain sugar, the idea is immediately you're going to be afraid of those. So someone immediately gets carb phobic. I can't eat carbohydrate. I can't eat plant-based carbs. Here's the problem. The body regulates blood sugar because sugar is the most important commodity in the human body. The body takes that sugar, puts it in little energy factories called mitochondria, and in the presence of the oxygen that we breathe, it transforms that into packets of energy that allow us to do everything. So sugar is critical in the human body. It's so important that the body wants to keep it within a very well-defined range of normal. So it releases the hormone called insulin, which can now attach to cells and open up doorways in those cells to allow sugar to enter. Now, this is important because when you have sugar circulating in your blood, the body needs that for a certain amount of energy, but it wants to hold on to sugar like a savings account. And one of those places that it puts it into a savings account are muscle cells. So when insulin is released, it attaches to proteins on the surface of muscle cells that are almost like a key going into a lock. Think of insulin like a key. Think of the protein receptor on the surface of muscle being the lock. When insulin inserts in that lock, the membrane of the muscle cell opens like a door opening and sugar rushes in where the body can hold on to it. Here's the problem. When you have high fat in the diet, and especially from refined foods, animal foods, but even to some degree in high plant foods, that fat will fill up those muscle cells, making it impossible for sugar to have any place to go. You actually get droplets of fat in the muscle. So when you get those droplets of fat building up, the body blocks the way insulin works to regulate sugar, and you create a problem called insulin resistance. When the body and when insulin's not attaching and working well, the membrane of the muscle can't open, sugar can't enter, and sugar starts rising in the bloodstream. So while you think it's a sugar problem, the real underlying problem is high fat from processed animal foods and so on, not sugar. You know, we have people come into our centers with type 2 diabetes and we give them nothing but carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, and the like. And we see drops in blood sugar 100 to 200 points in a week. They're eating nothing but carbohydrate. So the point here is you've got to understand that it's the high fat that's the problem. And I bring it up because for decades, the American Diabetic Association, American Medical Association, when someone has type 2 diabetes, what's the first thing they do? Take away all carbohydrate and load them with high animal protein and fat, which is only reinforcing the inability of insulin to work. Now, if you got type 2 diabetes, yeah, initially you got to be a little sensitive to the foods. I recommend having the fruits and things with more greens, celery, cucumber, lettuces, things like that, that can modify some absorption, but it's not a sugar problem. It's a fat problem from processed animal foods and high fat diets. That's the real problem. And so we see type 2 diabetes remarkably change quickly. And there's groups out there like Mastering Diabetes with Robbie Barbado. They all follow. They're eating tons of fruit a day. These are type 1 diabetics that are eating tons of fruits, vegetables all day, and a lot of fresh fruit, and their blood sugar levels are very stable. So this has been another big lie and another big confusion in the field of treating diabetes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, you mentioned type 1 diabetes. If type 2 diabetes is so affected by our diet and our lifestyle, it's commonly thought that type 1 diabetes is different, it's more genetic and not really much affected by our diet and lifestyle.
But it's still affected by lifestyle, interestingly enough. The truth is, yes, in a type 1 diabetic, it's usually presented as kind of like an autoimmune breakdown of the body's ability to produce insulin, or the way, the receptors are working, but typically insulin production. So these are people that are supplemented on insulin for most of their lives. So the truth of the matter is, it's interesting though, that even though they have that problem, which is more genetically determined, when you put them on these kinds of diets, more fresh fruits, vegetables, and so on, their insulin dependency does become better. It actually improves. So it's telling you that something is changing in a positive way, even from the diet. But in my opinion, it can't be completely corrected because there is a genetic mishap.
So you're not saying genetic and autoimmune are necessarily one and the same?
No, they're not. But many times autoimmune problems can be genetically determined. Yes.
Gotcha.
They can happen genetically, but a lot of times they can happen in lifestyle abuse across time too. You get changes where the body starts attacking its own proteins and its own tissue, and that can be conditioned by changes in the gut, changes with the microbiome, poor foods over time, stress. Many things can begin to affect that.
Well, fat is the final result, but the biggest problem is when we overdo what we're supposed to be doing, we get inflammatory, and inflammatory is the leading cause of all these things that we got to reduce. And that's what your diet does in your book. It reduces the inflammatory in the body.
And especially body fat. Fat cells are producing chemicals that dramatically ratchet up inflammation. So by bringing that down, you bring down that entire inflammatory environment. And that's a very important piece for restoring health across time.
Wow. Wonderful, wonderful information, everybody. Get this book. Hold up that book again. Get this book. It's on Amazon. I'm putting the link below. You can get it in a digital form, hard copy form. This should be a best-selling book and great information. Put your comments and questions below, and we'll have Dr. Frank Sabatino back on with some of those questions. Maybe we'll do a live stream for people if you're okay with that.
Because when you go through this, there's going to spawn a lot of questions too, and I'm more than happy to spend as much time going over that because it's that important.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for being on today. I'm going to put your information below, but if people want to contact you, what's your website?
Yeah, it's Balance, BALANCE, FORLIFE, Florida, FLORIDA.com.
All right.
balanceforlifeflorida.com.
The book, the fasting retreats, consultations, just your experience, so much information out there. People contact this man. He's a treasure of knowledge, and I'm glad to know him and call him a friend. Thank you for being on the show, man.
Paulie, thank you for the opportunity. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody, go get that book. Links below. Have a great day and a great raw life.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.